Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about probably the most famous American, a founding father, and our first president, George Washington. And what we're going to be discussing is probably the most, or one of the most pervasive myths in American history, that George Washington's teeth were made out of wood. Now you may be asking yourself, if they weren't made out of wood, then what were they made out of? According to MountVernon.org, which is the website ran by Mount Vernon, which is George Washington's estate and museum, there are 4 sets of dentures that belonged to Washington during his lifetime that are on display. There's a 5th set, but it's believed to be buried with Washington. But those 4 sets, none of those are made out of wood. They're made out of hippopotamus, walrus, and elephant ivory, cow, horse, and yes, human teeth, and lead, brass, silver, and gold. So the idea that where did the idea that his teeth were made out of wood come from? Nobody really knows the story, but most people think it probably had something to do with the fact that as he wore his dentures longer and longer and longer, they would turn brown, and people would see him and they would assume that his teeth were made out of wood because they looked like it. And you're probably thinking to yourself, gosh, that would be really, really, really uncomfortable if instead of your own teeth, you would have metal and other people's teeth and elephant ivory shoved up into your head, and you have to walk around like that, talking and breathing and eating with that in your mouth, and how much pain that would cause. And it's actually if you look at Washington's writings throughout his life, it's one of the more constant things he complains about is just how much pain he's in. If you know anybody that's ever been in pain for a long amount of time, it seems like they just kind of get sadder and sadder, and more down and down, and they're just kind of dour. And if you look at old paintings of Washington, a lot of historians think the reason he looks so sad and kind of just in his photos, in his paintings rather, is because his teeth were just so much of a problem for him. I mean, at age 24, he wrote about how he paid a Dr. Watson, doctor spelled D-O-C-T-R, 5 shillings to remove one of his teeth, and by the time he was 57, he had a full set of dentures in his head. The human teeth thing, by the way, is kind of an interesting little controversy that's happened recently, because it's pretty bad to think about the fact that, well, number one, where do the teeth come from? And a lot of evidence. There's a lot of evidence that a lot of those teeth came from slaves. Now, not necessarily in Washington's case, but obviously he wasn't the only person that had problems with his teeth in that time. I mean, dental hygiene was horrible, obviously, because we don't have modern toothbrushes and flossing, and people visiting the dentist regularly. So there's no evidence necessarily that Washington's teeth were made from teeth of slaves, but he did have human teeth in his head. Now, if you look in history, there were dentists advertising kind of like a tooth trade business where people could literally pull teeth out of their head and sell them. And yes, sometimes slave owners would pull teeth out of their slaves' heads and sell them, which is just a horrible, awful thing to think about, and just another blot on the country in terms of our history with slavery. But also, sometimes they would be pulled from dead people. So there's a good chance Washington had some dead guy's teeth in his head. Imagine how the hygiene behind that, having some dead person's teeth pulled out of their head and shoved in yours. Just not a pretty sight at all to even think about. But regardless, Washington's teeth were not made out of wood. They were made out of a bunch of horrible things that you wouldn't want to put in your head. And it's no wonder that he looks so sad.